I am Rachel, 33 years old, and today I watched my sister raise a glass of champagne at her lavish Hamptons wedding just to call me a useless fat pig in front of 200 high society guests. As the crowd erupted in laughter, I did not shed a single tear. I just sat there waiting. Because what my sister and her arrogant new husband did not know was that I had just bought the company he worked for, and I was stepping in as his new CEO on Monday morning. Before I continue this story, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand up to toxic family members who pushed you too far. The evening air in the Hamptons was crisp, carrying the scent of sea salt and thousands of imported white orchids that adorned every table. It was a picture-perfect wedding reception held at a sprawling rented estate that screamed old money and new debt. Crystal chandeliers hung from the massive outdoor tent, casting a warm, expensive glow over the 200 guests. Women in designer gowns and men in custom-tailored suits sat at the tables drinking premium champagne and dining on lobster. I sat at the head table pushed slightly to the edge, wearing a simple but elegant tailored suit. I was the maid of honor in name, only a prop for my younger sister Brittany to use for her aesthetic vision. At 30 years old, Brittany was the undisputed golden child of our family. She was radiant tonight, her face perfectly contoured, her wedding dress sparkling with hand-sewn crystals. Beside her sat her new husband Jamal. At 34, Jamal was a senior sales executive at a major tech firm called Apex Innovations. He was a tall, handsome African-American man who wore his ambition like a shield. He wore a custom Tom Ford tuxedo paid for by my parents, and he had a smug, self-satisfied smile plastered across his face. The clinking of a silver spoon against crystal cut through the low hum of conversation. Brittany stood up, her champagne flute raised high. The guests quieted down, turning their attention to the glowing bride. "I want to make a toast," Brittany announced, her voice echoing perfectly through the expensive sound system. She looked around the tent, flashing her brilliant, surgically enhanced smile. "I want to thank my amazing parents, Richard and Patricia, for giving Jamal and me the wedding of our dreams. And I want to thank my incredible new husband for being the most successful, driven man I have ever met." The crowd clapped politely. Jamal beamed, kissing her hand. But mostly Brittany continued, her tone shifting to something dangerously sweet. "I want to raise a glass to my older sister Rachel." I stiffened. I knew my sister better than anyone. I knew that sweet tone was the exact sound she made right before she went in for the kill. "Rachel has always been such an inspiration to me," Brittany said, pacing slightly behind the head table. "Growing up, I used to look at her and think, wow, I really need to take care of myself. I mean, having a useless fat pig for an older sister is the absolute best motivation a girl could ask for to stay in shape and find a rich husband." The silence that fell over the tent lasted only a fraction of a second before the laughter started. It was not polite, suppressed laughter. It was a roaring, genuine wave of amusement from 200 people. The sound hit me like a physical blow. I watched as my aunt at the next table covered her mouth, her shoulders shaking with mirth. I watched the groomsmen chuckling and raising their glasses. But the worst part was not the guests. It was my own family. I looked at my parents, Richard and Patricia. They were not horrified. They were not rushing to stop her. My mother was actually dabbing a tear of laughter from her eye, leaning into my father, who had a broad grin on his face. Jamal was openly laughing, wrapping an arm around Brittany's waist as if she had just delivered the most brilliant comedy routine of the century. "Rachel really took one for the team," Brittany added over the microphone, riding the wave of the crowd's reaction. "She stayed single, childless, and completely obsessed with whatever boring office job she has, just so I could shine as the beautiful, successful daughter. Let us give it up for Rachel, the ultimate cautionary tale." More laughter, more applause. The flash of the wedding photographer's camera went off, capturing my humiliation in high definition. My face burned. The heat radiating from my cheeks felt like a physical fire, but my hands gripping the white linen tablecloth were ice cold. Years of this exact treatment flashed through my mind. Years of being told I was not pretty enough, not outgoing enough, not worthy of the space I took up. They had always treated me like a stepping stone, a background character existing solely to highlight Brittany's supposed perfection. I did not cry. I had stopped crying over my family's cruelty a long time ago. Instead, a cold, calculating calm washed over me. I looked at Jamal, who was raising his glass to me with a mocking salute. He felt so powerful in that Tom Ford suit, so secure in his high-paying corporate job. He had no idea that the boring office job Brittany just mocked was actually me running Vanguard Equity. He had no idea that my firm had orchestrated a hostile takeover of Apex Innovations last Thursday. He had no idea that the corporate credit card he had been using to illegally fund this very wedding was about to trigger a federal fraud investigation. I took a slow, deep breath. The laughter was dying down and the band was preparing to start playing again. I had endured enough. It was time to leave them to their delusions. I placed my napkin on the table and pushed my chair back, the wooden legs scraping against the floorboards. I stood up, smoothing the front of my suit, fully intending to walk out of that tent, get into my car and sever ties with these people forever. But before I could even turn my body toward the exit, a heavy hand clamped down hard on my shoulder, its grip painfully tight. I looked down at the large, red-faced hand gripping my shoulder. The heavy gold Rolex glinting under the chandelier light belonged to my father, Richard. His fingers dug into my collarbone with enough force to leave a bruise. He leaned down, his breath smelling of expensive scotch and cigars, and shoved me hard. I fell back into my chair with a heavy thud, the wooden legs scraping loudly against the floorboards. Before I could even catch my breath or adjust my suit, my mother, Patricia, leaned across the table. To any outside observer, she probably looked like a loving mother whispering a sweet, intimate secret to her daughter. She maintained a flawless, camera-ready smile for the surrounding guests. But under the table, her perfectly manicured acrylic nails dug into my forearm like talons, pinning me in place. "Sit down," Patricia hissed, her voice a venomous whisper, meant only for my ears. "She is pregnant with the first grandchild of this family. Do you want to stress her into a miscarriage just because you are jealous and barren?" I stared at the woman who gave birth to me. The sheer cruelty of her words hung in the air between us. Barren. It was her favorite word to throw at me ever since I focused on building Vanguard Equity instead of hunting for a husband. She weaponized my lack of children, twisting my personal life choices into a supposed medical defect just to make herself feel superior. She knew exactly how to strike where she thought it would hurt the most, entirely convinced that my silence was a sign of weakness and submission. "You are always making everything about you." Patricia continued, her smile never wavering as she adjusted her diamond necklace. "Brittany was just making a harmless joke. She included you in her toast, and this is how you repay her. By throwing a tantrum and trying to storm out of her wedding reception." "You are so incredibly sensitive, Rachel. It is pathetic. This is exactly why you cannot keep a man. No one wants to deal with this kind of energy." Richard leaned in on my other side, creating a physical cage of parental toxicity. He tapped his heavy signet ring against the table, his face flushed with alcohol and indignation. "You are not ruining your sister's night," he muttered, his tone dripping with absolute authority. "You will sit here. You will smile. You will eat the food I paid for. You owe this family, Rachel. Do not forget who paid your hospital bills 3 years ago when you needed your appendix out. $2,000 straight out of my own pocket because you were too stubborn to get a real job with actual health insurance. You owe us for the very air you breathe in this tent tonight." I kept my face entirely blank. I did not flinch. I did not argue. Arguing with Patricia and Richard was like trying to reason with a brick wall. They thrived on a very specific narrative, a fantasy world where Brittany was the flawless angel who could do no wrong, and I was the ungrateful burden who needed to be constantly managed, disciplined, and shamed. They needed me to be a failure, so their own mediocre parenting could look like a heroic sacrifice. "We remortgaged our house to give Brittany the wedding she deserves," Richard boasted quietly, leaning closer, so only I could hear his financial bragging. "We pulled out all our equity to buy Jamal a brand new Mercedes as a wedding gift. We sacrificed for this family to secure our future. Jamal is a winner. He is about to be named vice president at Apex Innovations. He provides status. What do you provide, Rachel? Nothing but stress and disappointment. The least you can do is show some respect and act like a normal human being for one night. He remortgaged the house. I filed that crucial piece of information away in my mind. Vanguard Equity. My firm had recently been aggressively buying up distressed debt portfolios and secondary mortgages from regional banks across the East Coast. If Richard was stretching his finances that thin for a luxury car and a flashy party, his financial foundation was made of sand. He thought he was a powerful patriarch, putting his rogue daughter in her place. He had no idea he was lecturing the woman who could single-handedly liquidate his entire life with one phone call. Patricia released her grip on my arm, smoothing out the invisible wrinkles on my jacket sleeve with a patronizing pat. "Just look at her, Richard," she sighed softly, feigning deep maternal exhaustion, sitting there with that cold, dead look in her eyes. "I do not know where we went wrong with her. Brittany is glowing, creating life, marrying a future executive. And Rachel cannot even muster up a single smile for her own sister. It breaks my heart." She wiped a fake tear away, playing the martyr flawlessly. I watched them both, my heart beating at a slow, steady rhythm. I watched how easily they lied, how comfortably they wore their cruelty disguised as parental concern. They were masters of the game, experts at making me the villain in a story where I was the only one actually working, actually building something real. They lived on maxed-out credit cards and borrowed prestige, pretending to be high society while drowning in debt just to keep up appearances for people who did not even care about them. The wedding band struck up a lively jazz tune, and the surrounding guests returned to their lavish meals. The brief interruption of Brittany's toast was already fading into the background of clinking crystal and polite, wealthy chatter. My parents leaned back in their chairs, satisfied that they had successfully contained the threat of my early departure. They took sips of their expensive wine, congratulating themselves silently on keeping the family outcast firmly in line. I remained seated, my posture perfectly straight, my hands resting neatly in my lap. I was not staying because they had forced me. I was not staying because I felt guilty or indebted for a $2,000 medical loan I had tried to pay back a dozen times, only for them to refuse it so they could keep holding it over my head. I was staying because the main event of the evening had not even started yet. The air behind me suddenly felt heavier. The ambient light from the chandeliers was blocked out. A tall, broad shadow fell over the white tablecloth directly covering my plate. I did not need to turn around to know who it was. The heavy scent of expensive cologne and sheer, unadulterated arrogance announced him before he even spoke. It was the groom, Jamal. It was the groom, Jamal. He stepped up to the table, positioning himself directly behind my chair. He wore a custom midnight blue Tom Ford tuxedo that stretched perfectly across his broad shoulders. He adjusted his diamond cufflinks, his dark skin glowing under the warm light of the chandeliers, looking every inch the powerful corporate executive he believed himself to be. He smelled of expensive bourbon and unchecked arrogance. Without a word of greeting, he tossed a heavy black leather folder directly onto my plate. It landed with a sharp thud, knocking over my crystal water glass. I did not flinch, as the ice water spilled across the white linen, soaking into the fabric just inches from my lap. "Open it, Rachel," Jamal commanded. His deep voice was loud, deliberately carrying to the neighboring tables. Several wealthy guests turned their heads, their eyes gleaming with the promise of more free entertainment. Brittany had already warmed them up with her vicious toast. Jamal was here to deliver the punchline. I slowly opened the leather folder. Inside was the final catering invoice for the evening, printed on thick ivory paper. My eyes scanned the itemized charges. Beluga caviar stations, Wagyu beef sliders, vintage Dom Perignon towers. The total at the bottom was printed in bold black ink. $45,000. "That is your contribution to this new family," Jamal stated, placing his large hands on the back of my chair and leaning in close. "Your parents have been generous enough to host this spectacular evening. In fact, Richard and Patricia just took out a second mortgage on their home to buy me a brand new Mercedes AMG for my wedding gift." The least you can do as the older unmarried sister who lives in some rented box in the city is cover the food. Patricia nodded vigorously, her diamond earrings catching the light as she leaned forward to support her new favorite child. It is only fair, Rachel. You have no husband to support, no children to feed, and no real expenses. We have a massive estate to maintain and appearances to keep up. You have nothing going on in your life. Be useful for once. Jamal chuckled a low, rumbling sound of pure condescension. He walked around to the side of the table, so I was forced to look at him. Look at you. 33 years old, sitting alone at a wedding, working some dead-end office job that probably pays pennies. Meanwhile, I am about to be named Vice President of Sales at Apex Innovations. I close multi-million-dollar contracts before you even wake up in the morning. I am the future of this family. I bring status. I bring wealth. You bring absolutely nothing. He tapped a manicured finger against the leather folder. So, you are going to pull out whatever sad little debit card you have in that purse, and you are going to max it out tonight. Consider it an investment in the people who actually matter. I stared at the invoice. $45,000 of sheer excess, and they expected me to swallow the cost because they thought I was a pathetic, easily intimidated spinster. Jamal was standing there practically vibrating with ego, fully believing he was an untouchable king of the corporate world. Apex Innovations. The name echoed in my mind like a perfectly timed symphony. Do not make that face, Jamal sneered, entirely misinterpreting my silence for fear. He crossed his arms over his chest, looking down his nose at me. If you cannot afford it, maybe you can take out a high-interest loan. Or better yet, maybe I can get you a job answering phones at Apex once my promotion is finalized next week. My new CEO is going to love me. I am bringing in record numbers. I could probably pull some strings and get you a desk near the restrooms. You would be great at fetching my coffee. Richard slammed his hand on the table again, rattling the silverware. Pay the damn bill, Rachel. Jamal is going to be running Apex soon. You want to stay on his good side. If you embarrass us right now and refuse to pay, I swear I will make sure you are cut out of every family event for the rest of your miserable life. You will be completely alone. The threat was supposed to break me. It was supposed to send me scrambling for my wallet, desperate to buy back their conditional toxic love. They wanted me to bleed myself dry to fund their superficial lifestyle. Jamal wanted me to pay for his caviar while he bragged about a promotion at a company my private equity firm had just aggressively acquired. He was flexing his corporate muscles, entirely oblivious to the fact that his department was bleeding money. He was entirely oblivious to the fact that his corporate credit cards were already red-flagged in my system for embezzlement. He was mocking my apartment, unaware that my firm Vanguard Equity owned the luxury high-rise building he currently lived in. I did not cry. I did not shout. I did not jump up and cause the dramatic scene they were all so desperately hoping for. I just sat there letting the sheer absurdity of their demands wash over me. The power dynamic in this tent was entirely backward, and they were too blinded by their own arrogance to see the guillotine swinging down toward their necks. I looked down at the $45,000 invoice, tracing the bold black numbers with my eyes. Then I slowly looked up at Jamal. I met his arrogant, condescending gaze with a dead-eyed, razor-sharp smile. You are absolutely right, Jamal, I said softly, my voice carrying a lethal, unshakable calm. This family deserves exactly what is coming to them. Without breaking eye contact, I reached down and slid my hand into my designer purse. I pulled my hand from my purse, entirely bypassing my standard banking cards and the sleek silver card I used for minor business expenses. Instead, I grabbed the heavy cold metal of my American Express Centurion card, the infamous black card. It is made of anodized titanium invitation only and requires millions of dollars in annual spending just to maintain. I use it strictly for high-tier corporate acquisitions at Vanguard Equity, but tonight it was going to buy me the greatest show of my life. I tossed the solid metal card onto the leather folder. It did not make the flimsy plastic sound of a standard credit card. It hit the table with a distinct heavy clack that resonated over the jazz music playing in the background. Jamal stared at the black rectangle sitting on top of his precious $45,000 invoice. For a second, his brain short-circuited. Then he burst into a loud, theatrical roar of laughter. He actually clutched his stomach, leaning back in his custom tuxedo. "You have got to be kidding me," Jamal gasped, wiping a tear of mirth from his eye. "A fake black card? Really? Rachel, did you buy a novelty prop off the internet just to look cool at my wedding? That is the most pathetic thing I have ever seen. You realize they are going to run that through a machine, right? You are going to go to jail for fraud." Richard scoffed, shaking his head in deep disgust. He leaned forward, his face flushed with anger and embarrassment. "Stop playing these childish games, Rachel. This is a high society event. We are surrounded by elite real estate developers and top-tier executives. Put that piece of metal junk away and hand over a real card before I have security drag you out of here for making a mockery of this family." Patricia hissed from her seat, glancing nervously at the wealthy guests at the adjacent tables. "She is having a mental breakdown. I knew we should not have invited her. She is so desperate for attention she is using fake credit cards to pretend she is rich. Just take her purse, Richard. Find her debit card and run it." I ignored all three of them. I did not defend the card, I did not explain myself. I simply raised two fingers in the air, a subtle commanding gesture I used in boardrooms from Wall Street to Silicon Valley. Almost instantly, the estate manager approached our table. His name tag read, Monsieur Henri. He was a stiff, meticulously groomed man who had spent the entire evening catering to Brittany and Jamal with a barely concealed look of exhaustion. He had clearly dealt with their arrogant, newly rich demands all week. He stepped up to the table, a wireless payment terminal in his hand, preparing to deal with what he likely assumed was another argument over the bill. "Monsieur Henri Face," said my voice calm and authoritative. "I will be settling the balance for the bride and groom tonight." Henri looked down at the leather folder. His practiced, polite smile faltered the absolute second his eyes locked onto the black titanium card. Unlike my parents and my arrogant brother-in-law, a seasoned estate manager who catered to billionaires in the Hamptons knew exactly what a real Centurion card looked like. He recognized the weight of it. He recognized the laser-engraved details. His entire posture transformed. The subtle exhaustion vanished, replaced immediately by the rigid, hyper-respectful stance of a man standing before true, unadulterated wealth. Right away, Madame Henri said, his voice dropping into a tone of absolute reverence. He reached out with both hands to pick up the titanium card, handling it as if it were a fragile artifact. Jamal snorted, crossing his arms over his broad chest. "Make sure you check the name on that piece of tin, Henri. She probably stole it from someone at her sad little office job, or it will just decline and embarrass her. Go ahead, run it. I want to see her face when it gets declined for a $45,000 charge." Henri did not even look at Jamal. He maintained direct eye contact with me, treating me as the only person of consequence at the table. He slid the heavy metal card into the wireless terminal. There was a moment of silence. Jamal wore a smirk of absolute triumph. Richard crossed his arms, waiting for my public humiliation. Patricia sighed dramatically, preparing to apologize to the crowd for her rogue, delusional daughter. The machine let out a sharp, cheerful beep. Approved. The terminal immediately began printing the receipt, the paper whirring out in a long, white strip. Jamal's smirk instantly vanished. His dark eyes widened, staring at the printing receipt as if it were a venomous snake. Richard's jaw went slack. He leaned forward, blinking rapidly, trying to comprehend what had just happened. $45,000 had just cleared instantly without a security hold, without a phone call to the bank, without a single hesitation. Henri tore the receipt from the machine and placed it on the table in front of me, clicking a silver pen and offering it with a deep, respectful bow. "Thank you for your extraordinary generosity, madame. Is there anything else I can assist you with this evening?" I took the pen. I signed my name with a fluid, practiced motion. Then I looked up at Henri. I pitched my voice perfectly. Not a shout, but a clear, carrying projection designed to cut through the ambient noise of the wedding tent. I wanted every high society guest, every gossiping aunt, and every arrogant groomsman to hear me. "Yes, Henri," I said smoothly, handing the receipt back. Please make sure to categorize this $45,000 payment strictly under charity donations for my corporate tax write-offs. As you can see, the newlyweds are completely broke and drowning in debt. I am just doing my civic duty to keep them out of bankruptcy court for one more night. The silence that crashed down over the wedding tent was absolute. The jazz band actually stopped playing a stray saxophone note hanging awkwardly in the air. Gasps rippled through the surrounding tables. The wealthy elites, the real estate developers, the corporate executives, they all heard it. The illusion of Jamal and Brittany's lavish wealth shattered into a million irreparable pieces. Whispers ignited like wildfire across the venue. They heard the bride and groom were broke. They heard the quiet single sister had just casually dropped $45,000 as a tax write-off. Richard looked like he was having a stroke. Patricia hid her face behind her hands, the social humiliation practically burning her alive. Jamal stood frozen, his chest heaving, his powerful corporate persona entirely castrated by a single sentence. He realized in real time that he was not the richest man in the room. He was a charity case. But it was Brittany who reacted the loudest. Her fairy tale wedding, her narrative of being the superior wealthy golden child had been publicly slaughtered. She realized everyone was staring at her with pity and judgment. Her face turned a violent, blotchy purple with uncontrollable rage. She let out a guttural shriek, her perfectly manicured hands lunging across the white tablecloth as she grabbed a full glass of red wine. The dark crimson liquid arched through the air in slow motion. It hit the lapel of my tailored silk suit, soaking instantly into the pristine fabric and splashing heavily against my collarbone. Drops of vintage Cabernet Sauvignon splattered across my cheeks, running down my neck and staining my white blouse like fresh blood. The crowd surrounding us gasped collectively. A few wealthy guests at the nearest tables actually jumped out of their seats to avoid the splash zone, their eyes wide with shock. I did not move a single muscle. I did not flinch. I did not reach for a napkin to dry myself. I did not even raise a hand to wipe the wine dripping from my chin. I simply closed my eyes for one brief, calculated second, feeling the cold liquid seep into my clothes, and then I opened them to lock my gaze entirely onto my sister. "You jealous, bitter, miserable witch!" Brittany shrieked, her voice cracking with pure, unhinged hysteria. She threw the empty crystal goblet onto the table, shattering the fragile glass against a porcelain salad plate. "How dare you! How dare you try to ruin my perfect day with your pathetic little stunts? You think you are better than us because you saved up some money to buy a flashy credit card? You are nothing. You will always be nothing." Patricia frantically grabbed Brittany by the arm, her face pale with the terror of social ruin. "Brittany, sweetheart, lower your voice, the investors are looking." But Brittany was too far gone. The illusion of her flawless, wealthy fairy tale had been ripped away, and she was thrashing wildly to get it back. She pointed a shaking finger at my wine-stained chest. "My husband is Jamal. He is the future vice president of Apex Innovations. He is going to be running a billion-dollar tech empire while you rot in your rented apartment. He is going to crush you. He is going to make sure you never find work in this city again." Richard glared at me, his fists clenched at his sides. "Look what you have done, Rachel. You are a disgrace. You provoked her. You humiliated this family on purpose just because you cannot stand to see your sister happy and wealthy." Jamal stepped forward, straightening his custom Tom Ford jacket. He puffed out his chest, desperate to salvage his crushed ego in front of the whispering elite guests. He looked down at me, his eyes filled with absolute contempt. "Look at you!" Jamal sneered, his deep voice carrying over the murmurs of the crowd. "Covered in wine, embarrassing yourself in front of my network. My wife is absolutely right. You are a complete joke. You think a parlor trick with a credit card changes the hierarchy. Here I am untouchable. The new ownership at Apex just cleared out the old dead weight in the executive suite. They are making room for the real producers, men like me. My new CEO is going to hand me the keys to the kingdom by Monday morning. I will have more power in my little finger than you will see in your entire pathetic life." Richard puffed up, aligning himself with Jamal's supposed power. "You hear that, Rachel? You are messing with the wrong people. Jamal is a winner. You are just a sad, lonely woman trying to buy attention." I let the wine drip onto my lap. I did not break eye contact with Jamal. I knew exactly what was happening at Apex Innovations. I knew because my signature was on the buyout documents that had terminated the old executive board just 48 hours ago. I knew because my forensic accountants had spent the entire weekend tearing through Jamal's departmental budgets. I watched him gloat, completely unaware that he was standing on a trap door and my hand was already resting on the lever. Before Jamal could spit out another insult, a sharp, piercing marimba ringtone suddenly cut through the tension. It was coming from the inner pocket of his tuxedo jacket. Jamal frowned, reaching into his coat, annoyed by the interruption. But as he pulled out the phone and glanced at the glowing screen, his arrogant sneer widened into a massive, triumphant grin. He held the phone up so Richard, Patricia, and Brittany could see the caller ID. "Speak of the devil," Jamal boasted, his voice booming with renewed aggressive confidence. "It is the Apex Executive Board. They must be calling to finalize my promotion package right now. Let me show you how a real power player handles business, Rachel. Take notes." He swiped the screen to accept the call and deliberately put it on speakerphone, holding the device in the center of our toxic little circle. He wanted everyone at the head table to hear his glorious coronation. "Jamal speaking?" he answered, oozing sleazy corporate charm. "I am actually at my wedding reception right now, but for the board I always have time. What can I do for you gentlemen tonight?" The voice that echoed out of the speaker was not warm. It was not congratulatory. It was the icy, mechanical, and lethal voice of David Caldwell, the chief legal counsel I had personally installed at Apex yesterday to clean house. "This is David Caldwell, chief legal counsel for the new transition team at Apex Innovations," the voice announced flatly. "This is not a congratulatory call." Jamal's smile faltered. The smugness drained out of his dark eyes, replaced by a flicker of genuine confusion. "Excuse me, is there a problem with the vice president paperwork? I was told my promotion was guaranteed after the merger." "There is no vice president paperwork for you," Caldwell stated, every word striking the air like a hammer. "You are hereby ordered to appear in the main executive boardroom at exactly 8 o'clock on Monday morning. Your keycard access to the rest of the building has been immediately revoked." Jamal visibly panicked. His hands started shaking slightly as he gripped the phone. "Revoked? What are you talking about? I am the top revenue driver in the sales department. I have the best numbers in the region. I demand to know what this is about." "You will be meeting directly with the new CEO," Caldwell answered, his tone completely void of emotion. "You are required to provide a full itemized explanation for a $2 million deficit discovered in your department's accounts during our hostile takeover audit today. Bring legal representation. If you are 1 minute late, we will bypass termination and hand the forensic financial file directly to federal authorities. Enjoy the rest of your wedding." The line went dead with a sharp click. The silence that followed was suffocating. Jamal's hand slowly dropped to his side. The phone slipped from his fingers and clattered against the wooden floorboards. The arrogant, untouchable groom who had just demanded $45,000 from me was gone. In his place stood a man whose entire world had just been vaporized. His face lost all its color, turning a sick ashen gray. He looked utterly terrified. The phone lay on the floor, its screen glowing in the dim light beneath the table. The sudden agonizing silence at our table stood in stark contrast to the lively chatter and jazz music echoing through the rest of the reception tent. The illusion of power so meticulously maintained by my family had vanished in the span of a 60-second phone call. Richard stared at the dropped phone, his mouth agape. Patricia clutched her pearl necklace, her eyes darting frantically between Jamal and the surrounding guests, terrified that someone else had overheard the devastating call. Brittany stood frozen, the empty wine glass still dangling loosely from her fingers, her face a mask of shock and dawning horror. Jamal was a statue. His broad chest rose and fell in rapid, shallow breaths. The man who had sneered at me, who had arrogantly demanded I pay his $45,000 catering bill, looked as if the ground beneath his feet had suddenly turned to quicksand. A $2 million deficit. Meeting with the new CEO. Bring legal representation. The words hung in the air, invisible but suffocatingly heavy. I looked down at my wine-soaked silk suit, feeling the damp fabric clinging to my skin. I did not move to wipe it away. Instead, I slowly raised my eyes to meet Jamal's terrified gaze. "You should really pick that up, Jamal," I said softly, my voice perfectly level, slicing through the stunned silence at the table. "You would not want to miss any more important calls from the executive board. After all, you are the future of Apex Innovations." Without waiting for a response, I pushed my chair back, the legs scraping against the floorboards one final time. I stood up, my posture straight, holding my ruined jacket closed with one hand. I did not look at my parents. I did not look at my sister. I turned my back on the lavish, fraudulent wedding and walked out of the tent, my heels clicking sharply against the wooden walkway, leaving them to drown in the reality of their impending ruin. Sunday morning broke over the Hamptons with a sickly, humid heat matching the suffocating paranoia inside the estate. Inside the massive rented mansion, the post-wedding glow was entirely absent. Jamal paced the length of the extravagant master suite, his tie discarded, his dress shirt unbuttoned. He was frantic, aggressively rehearsing a defense speech, muttering financial jargon and throwing his hands up in frustrated gestures. "It is a misunderstanding," Jamal snapped, glaring at Brittany, who sat curled on the edge of the four-poster bed, clutching a silk pillow. "The transition team is just flexing their muscles. They want to see how I handle pressure. That is all this is. A loyalty test from the new CEO." Brittany wiped away a tear, her carefully planned post-wedding brunch outfit ruined by her distress. "But they said a $2 million deficit, Jamal. They said bring a lawyer. You told me the corporate card was practically unlimited. You told me it was an executive perk." Jamal whirled around, pointing an accusatory finger at her. "Keep your voice down. Do not talk about the corporate card. I manage those accounts. I brought in 10 times that amount in revenue. The new CEO just needs to see my portfolio. Once I show them the projections for the next quarter, this whole audit thing goes away. They need me. I am the only one who knows the Asian market accounts. I will walk in there tomorrow, demand a seat at the table, and secure that VP title. They cannot run that sales division without me." His aggressive bluster filled the room, but the slight tremor in his hands betrayed his deep-rooted panic. He was attempting to gaslight himself, clinging desperately to the delusion of his own indispensability. He believed his arrogance could overpower a forensic audit. Miles away in the heart of Manhattan, the atmosphere was drastically different. The Vanguard Equity penthouse office was an expanse of dark mahogany, brushed steel, and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. The room was silent, save for the hum of high-end servers and the quiet shuffling of papers. I sat at the head of a massive conference table, having swapped the wine-stained suit for a sharp slate-gray blazer. The air conditioning was crisp, maintaining the clinical-focused environment I required. Across from me sat Wyatt, my lead corporate attorney. Wyatt was a shark in a tailored suit, a man who dismantled fraudulent executives for sport. Flanking him were 3 forensic accountants, their eyes glued to dual monitor setups, rapidly tracing the labyrinth of Jamal's financial deception. "We have finished mapping the shell companies, Rachel," Wyatt said, his voice calm and precise, slicing through the quiet room. He created 3 fictitious consulting firms to route Apex funds directly into his personal offshore accounts. The $2 million deficit is just the surface layer. The deeper we dig, the more blatant the embezzlement becomes. I leaned forward, clasping my hands on the cool mahogany table. "Detail the expenditures, Wyatt. I want to know exactly what my family considers executive perks." One of the accountants, a young woman with sharp eyes, handed Wyatt a consolidated report. Wyatt scanned the top page, a tight, grim smile forming on his lips. He slid the heavy manila folder across the smooth surface of the table until it rested directly in front of me. "He was not even trying to hide it properly," Wyatt stated, tapping the folder. "He used the primary Apex corporate card for personal expenses over the last 8 months. The custom Mercedes-AMG purchased outright with company funds disguised as a fleet vehicle upgrade. The rental for the Hamptons estate this weekend, billed as an off-site corporate strategy retreat. And the 6 Hermes Birkin bags he gifted your sister." Wyatt shook his head. categorized as client appreciation gifts. It is textbook corporate fraud, Rachel. It is arrogant, sloppy, and entirely illegal. We have him dead to rights. I opened the folder, my eyes tracing the highlighted transactions. Every lavish detail of Brittany's perfect life, every boast Richard had made about Jamal's wealth, every insult they had hurled at me regarding my rented apartment. It was all funded by stolen money. Money stolen from the company I now owned. They had mocked my financial status while completely subsidizing their fraudulent lifestyle with my assets. I closed the folder, the thick paper making a soft, definitive snap. The pieces were all perfectly aligned. The trap was set, and the bait had already been swallowed. Jamal believed he was walking into a negotiation tomorrow. He believed he was going to leverage his sales figures to secure a vice president title. He had no idea he was walking directly into a slaughterhouse. I looked up at Wyatt, my expression entirely void of sympathy or hesitation. The time for familial tolerance had expired the moment they threw that wine on me. "Lock the boardroom doors at 8 a.m., I said softly. "Lock the boardroom doors at 8 a.m. Monday morning arrived with a blinding, harsh sunlight that reflected off the towering glass and steel facade of the Apex Innovations headquarters in downtown Manhattan. The building was a monument to corporate power, a sleek monolith of modern architecture that intimidated most who walked through its revolving doors. But Jamal did not feel intimidated. As he stepped out of his black town car, handing the keys to the valet with a dismissive flick of his wrist, he felt like a conquering king returning to claim his throne. He had spent the entire Sunday convincing himself that the phone call from David Caldwell was nothing more than a high-level corporate stress test. In Jamal's mind, billionaire transition teams did not fire their top producers. They tested them. They wanted to see if the man handling the Asian market accounts would crack under the pressure of a random audit. He had dressed specifically for the occasion, wearing a bespoke charcoal pinstripe suit, a blood-red silk tie, and the arrogant swagger of a man who believed his own lies. He adjusted his platinum cufflinks, rolled his shoulders, and strode into the grand marble lobby. The morning rush was in full swing, but Jamal walked through the sea of employees like Moses parting the Red Sea. He did not say good morning. He did not nod to the security guards. He simply expected people to move out of his way, and they did. He stepped into the executive elevator just as the doors were closing, shoving his leather briefcase forward to block the sensor. The doors slid open again, revealing a young, nervous-looking intern holding a stack of coffee trays. The intern stumbled backward, spilling a few drops of hot coffee onto the pristine, mirrored floor of the elevator car. "Watch where you are standing!" Jamal snapped, his voice echoing in the confined space. He looked the young man up and down with absolute disgust. "What floor are you pressing, floor 12, sir?" The intern stammered, his hands shaking slightly as he balanced the cardboard trays. Jamal hit the button for floor 12, then immediately hit the button for floor 50, the executive suite. He leaned against the glass back wall, looking at his reflection and smoothing his tie. "You are spilling coffee in the executive lift, kid. If you are going to be a glorified delivery boy, at least have the decency to do it without making a mess. I am heading up to a meeting with the new CEO to finalize my vice president contract. If I step in that puddle and ruin my $4,000 shoes before I walk into the boardroom, I will make sure Human Resources rips up your internship papers before lunch." The intern swallowed hard, staring at his feet. "I am sorry, sir. It will not happen again." "It better not," Jamal sneered as the elevator pinged at the 12th floor. "Get out!" Jamal rode the rest of the way up to the executive floor alone, basking in the quiet hum of the machinery. He pulled out his phone, checking his reflection one last time. He looked powerful. He looked essential. He repeated his mental script. The $2 million deficit was a creative accounting strategy. The luxury car was a necessary networking tool. The Hamptons estate rental was a high-level client retention event. The new faceless owner of Apex Innovations would understand. Billionaires respected aggressive ambition. They respected men who took what they wanted and drove revenue. The elevator doors opened silently on the 50th floor. The executive level was completely different from the bustling sales floors below. It was a hushed, cavernous space lined with frosted glass walls, thick acoustic carpeting, and abstract modern art. The air up here smelled of polished wood and expensive cleaning supplies. Jamal strode out, his leather shoes sinking into the carpet. He passed the glass-walled offices of the senior sales directors. He stopped at the open door of the regional sales manager, a man named Henderson, who was frantically typing at his computer. Henderson, Jamal barked, not bothering to knock. "I need the Q3 projections for the Tokyo account on my desk by noon. Do not send me the preliminary numbers. I want the finalized aggressive targets." Henderson looked up, visibly stressed. "Jamal, the new transition team locked us out of the Tokyo files this morning. IT said there is a system-wide security protocol happening." Jamal waved his hand dismissively. "That is just Caldwell flexing his administrative muscles. I'm going into the boardroom right now to meet the new CEO and sort out this transition nonsense. Once my VP title is officially on paper, I will override the IT lockdown. Just have the hard copies ready. We are scaling up operations, and I will not let some administrative audit slow down my division." He did not wait for Henderson to reply. He turned and continued his march down the long corridor toward the main executive boardroom. His heart beat with a steady adrenaline-fueled rhythm. This was the moment. The minor humiliation at the wedding was already fading from his mind, replaced entirely by the intoxicating prospect of absolute corporate power. He envisioned walking out of the boardroom in an hour, calling Brittany, and telling her they were going to start looking for a permanent summer home in the Hamptons. He imagined laughing at Rachel and her little titanium credit card, completely secure in his new executive dominance. He reached the end of the hallway. The double doors of the main executive boardroom loomed before him. They were massive, constructed of solid dark oak with heavy brushed steel handles. This was the sanctum, the room where careers were made and destroyed. Jamal checked his gold Rolex. It was exactly 7:59. Perfect. He was punctual, confident, and ready to demand his throne. He straightened his posture, took one deep breath to inflate his chest, and grabbed the heavy steel handles. He pushed the heavy oak doors open with a forceful, commanding shove. The boardroom was vast, flooded with morning sunlight pouring in through the floor-to-ceiling panoramic windows that overlooked the Manhattan skyline. The long, polished mahogany table stretched out like a runway. The room was deathly quiet. At the far end of the table, silhouetted against the glaring city light, sat the high-backed black leather CEO chair. It was turned away from the door facing the window. Jamal stepped fully into the room, letting the heavy oak doors click shut behind him. The sound sealed him inside the cavernous space. He straightened his blood-red tie one last time and cleared his throat, projecting his deep, authoritative sales voice across the polished mahogany table. "Good morning. I am Jamal Davis, Senior Director of the Asian Market Division. I was told to be here at 8 o'clock sharp to discuss my transition to Vice President." The room remained perfectly silent for 5 agonizing seconds. The high-backed leather chair did not move. Jamal felt a brief flicker of irritation. Billionaire CEOs loved their power plays, making their subordinates wait, forcing them to stand while they stared out at the Manhattan skyline. Jamal took a confident step forward, resting his hands on the back of one of the leather guest chairs. "I know we have some minor accounting discrepancies to clear up from the transition audit," Jamal added smoothly, shifting into his best pitch mode. "But I can assure you my division is driving record profits. Whatever David Caldwell told you about the $2 million deficit is simply a matter of aggressive expansion spending. If we can just look at the quarterly projections." The heavy leather chair slowly began to swivel. Jamal stopped talking. He braced himself to meet the gaze of an older, ruthless Wall Street titan. He readied his best firm handshake and his most winning corporate smile. The chair completed its rotation. Jamal stopped breathing. His heart hit his ribs like a sledgehammer. The confident, arrogant smile froze on his face, rapidly decaying into a mask of pure, unadulterated shock. I sat in the center of the oversized CEO chair, leaning back comfortably with my legs crossed. I wore the same slate gray blazer I had worn the day before, my hair pulled back into a severe, sleek knot. I did not look like the sister-in-law he had mocked at the wedding reception. I did not look like the single pathetic woman he had demanded $45,000 from. I looked exactly like what I was, a corporate predator who had just trapped her prey. To my left stood Wyatt, my lead corporate attorney, holding a thick manila folder. His expression was entirely devoid of sympathy. To my right, stepping out from the shadows near the panoramic windows, were two massive men in dark suits. Corporate security. They stood with their hands clasped in front of them, their eyes locked onto Jamal. Jamal stared at me, his mouth open but no sound came out. He blinked rapidly, his brain desperately trying to process a visual reality that directly contradicted everything he believed about his life, his family, and his power. The cognitive dissonance was so violent, I could practically see the gears grinding to a halt behind his eyes. He looked at me, then at Wyatt, then at the security guards, and then back to me. "Rachel," Jamal whispered. His voice was completely stripped of its booming authority. It sounded hollow and weak. "Good morning, Jamal," I said. My voice was calm, steady, and chillingly polite. "Please take a seat. We have a lot of financial discrepancies to cover, and you are currently wasting my time." The sound of my voice seemed to snap him out of his paralysis. The shock mutated instantly into aggressive defensive rage. His ego simply could not allow him to accept the reality sitting right in front of him. He slammed his hands down on the back of the guest chair, his knuckles turning white. "What kind of sick joke is this?" Jamal demanded, his voice rising in volume and pitch. "How did you get up here? Did you follow me? Did you sneak past the lobby security just to continue your little tantrum from the wedding?" I did not flinch. I did not raise my voice. I simply watched him unravel. "You are completely out of your mind, Rachel," Jamal shouted, taking an aggressive step forward. Wyatt stepped up immediately, and the two security guards shifted their weight, their hands dropping to their sides. Jamal stopped, pointing a shaking finger at me. "You think you can just waltz into a secure corporate building, break into the executive boardroom, and play CEO? You are having a mental breakdown. This is trespassing. This is corporate espionage." He turned wildly toward the two security guards, his face flushed with panic and fury. "Do your jobs," Jamal barked at the guards, trying to reclaim his stolen authority. "Did you sneak in here with her security? Get this crazy woman out of my office. Arrest her. She has no business being on this floor." The guards did not move an inch. They did not even blink. They remained entirely focused on him, waiting for my command. Jamal looked back at me, his chest heaving. "You are going to prison for this, Rachel. I am calling David Caldwell. I am calling the police. You are going to be escorted out of here in handcuffs, and I am going to make sure my new boss presses maximum charges." He reached into his tailored jacket pocket, frantically pulling out his smartphone. His hands were shaking so violently he almost dropped the device. He swiped at the screen desperately, trying to dial the chief legal counsel who had called him last night. "You are going to regret this." Jamal spat, his eyes wide with a frantic, desperate energy. "You are just a pathetic, jealous woman who could not stand to see me succeed. You are nothing." I let him dial. I watched him press the phone to his ear, his eyes darting around the room like a cornered animal. I listened to the faint, continuous ringing coming from his device. Then a phone began to ring inside the boardroom. The sound came from Wyatt's coat pocket. My attorney calmly reached inside his suit, pulled out his ringing smartphone, and held it up so Jamal could see the screen. It was displaying Jamal's incoming number. David Caldwell reported directly to Wyatt. The entire legal transition team reported to me. Jamal slowly lowered his phone. The last remaining drops of blood drained from his face. His dark skin turned a sickly ashen hue. The phone slipped from his grasp, landing with a soft thud on the thick acoustic carpet. "Are you quite finished, Jamal?" I asked, leaning forward and resting my forearms on the polished mahogany table. "Or do you need another moment to scream at my security detail?" He swallowed hard. His Adam's apple bobbed in his throat. He shook his head slowly, taking a small, involuntary step backward toward the heavy oak doors. "You are not the CEO." Jamal whispered, his voice cracking with desperation. It is a trick. It has to be a trick. You rent an apartment. You work a dead-end job. You are just Rachel. I am Rachel, I agreed softly. And I am also the founder and chief executive officer of Vanguard Equity. I reached out and tapped a silver button on the conference table control console. The lights in the boardroom dimmed slightly. Behind Jamal, a mechanical whirring sound filled the air. He spun around, startled. Two massive motorized projector screens dropped down from the ceiling, covering the frosted glass walls. Twin, high-definition projectors hummed to life, casting bright, crisp images across the screens for everyone in the room to see. On the left screen was Jamal's exact employment contract with Apex Innovations, complete with his compensation package, his signing bonuses, and the strict termination clauses regarding corporate theft. On the right screen was the official finalized Apex Innovations corporate buyout agreement. The document outlined the transfer of all corporate assets, intellectual property, and executive control to Vanguard Equity. And right at the bottom of the page, authorized and notarized in bold black ink, was my exact signature. Jamal stared at the massive screens, his eyes tracking the loops and sharp angles of my handwriting over and over again. He looked as if staring hard enough could magically erase the ink from the digital document. The heavy silence in the boardroom was broken only by his ragged, uneven breathing. He reached up with a trembling hand and loosened his blood-red silk tie, pulling it away from his throat, as if the room had suddenly lost all its oxygen. I extended my hand without taking my eyes off him. Wyatt placed the thick manila folder directly into my palm. I flipped it open, smoothing the top page with deliberate, slow precision. I did not need to look at the numbers because my forensic team had briefed me on every single fraudulent transaction. Let us discuss the Asian market division budget, Jamal. I began, my voice echoing coldly off the frosted glass. Or rather, let us discuss how you treated the Apex corporate accounts like your personal piggy bank. Jamal swallowed hard. Sweat began to bead along his hairline, catching the harsh morning light pouring through the panoramic windows. He gripped the back of the leather guest chair so tightly his knuckles turned a sickly shade of white. Rachel, listen. He stammered, his booming corporate voice reduced to a frantic rasp. There is a standard operating procedure for executive spending. You do not understand how high-level corporate sales work. We have to entertain. We have to project success to secure these international contracts. Projecting success. I repeated, turning a page in the folder. A fascinating strategy. Let us look at a specific example of this strategy. Friday evening. A $45,000 catering charge at a rented Hamptons estate. You authorized this under an expense code labeled Off-Site Corporate Strategy Retreat. Tell me, Jamal. Were the beluga caviar stations critical to the Asian market expansion? Did the vintage champagne towers help close your latest quarterly deal? Jamal's mouth opened and closed. He looked at Wyatt, then at the security guards, realizing his audience was entirely hostile. That was a networking event, Jamal insisted, his voice trembling as he backed himself into a mental corner. Half the guests at that table were real estate developers and executives. It was a business function. I was building relationships. The $45,000 wedding catering stolen, I corrected sharply, cutting off his pathetic defense. And you paid for it with embezzled company funds right in front of me. But that is just a drop in the bucket. Let us keep going, line by line. I flipped to the next tab in the heavy file. 2 months ago, you purchased a custom Mercedes AMG for $140,000. You coded the invoice as a fleet vehicle upgrade. Apex Innovations does not have a corporate vehicle fleet. The Mercedes stolen. You parked a stolen vehicle in my sister's driveway and told my parents they needed to take out a second mortgage to pay you back for the wedding expenses you had already covered with my money. Jamal wiped a thick line of sweat from his forehead. His custom Tom Ford suit suddenly looked 2 sizes too big, hanging awkwardly off his slumping frame. I can explain the car, he pleaded, taking a shaky step forward. Wyatt immediately stepped between us, forcing Jamal to stay back. The Hermes bags, I continued, relentlessly ignoring his desperation. 6 designer handbags shipped directly to your residential address, totaling $90,000. Categorized as client appreciation gifts. I suppose Brittany is a very demanding client. The reality of his situation crashed down on him with the weight of an anvil. The arrogant, untouchable groom from the wedding was entirely gone. He collapsed into the leather guest chair, burying his face in his hands. The man who had mocked my rented apartment and threatened to make me fetch his coffee began to beg. "Please," Rachel Jamal pleaded, looking up with wild, terrified eyes. "I can pay it back. I will sell the car today. I will get the designer bags back from Brittany. Just dock my pay, deduct it from my end-of-year bonuses. I am the top revenue driver in this building. I can make this company 10 times what I took. You know my sales numbers. You need me here." "Your numbers are completely fabricated," Wyatt interjected smoothly, handing me a secondary report. "Our forensic accountants dismantled your sales logs overnight. You have been shifting projected revenue into current quarters to artificially inflate your commission payouts. The $2 million deficit is entirely your creation. You are not a top producer. You are a liability." Panic gave way to complete desperation, and that desperation mutated back into an aggressive, defensive rage. Jamal shot up from the chair,